Blessed and privileged this morning to have our first official event in campus here. Be blessed by His Grace, Bishop Angaelos. I think Sayyidina is a very well-recognized name, but for those who don't know, His Grace serves as General Bishop in the UK, in Stevenage, in the UK. His Grace was ordained in November 1999. I got ordained about an hour after His Grace, same day. Yes, an hour later. 1 hour. I was ordained, yeah. And a few, and so I took the blessing that day. His Grace also is a very well-spoken and speaks, is like the foreign minister of the Coptic Church, you know, has very clear and very powerful stances on the issues that are concurrent issues. I just learned that I was also obtained, was recognized by the British government, the Order of British Empire. Can I say that? Hopefully, next one coming soon.
What did you do, bro?
I don't know how to put your name a certain way. So, we're very privileged to have Sayyidina with us. A very busy schedule, but when asked to take the blessing, Sayyidina did not object. Sayyidina's been here a long time ago, several many years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and at the previous CS meeting, so we're very excited to have Sayyidina again. Thank you, Sayyidina. But hopefully it won't be another 9 years.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, it's very good to have you, to be among you, and to have you initiate this kind of ministry. I always, as you know, find that I lean a lot towards youth ministry. I've been in England now for 20 years, so I've been serving in youth ministry for 20 years. And it's wonderful to be able to see so many of you, because I've done my international ministry now for 15 since being a bishop. And some of you were very young when I started. And to see go through and the ministry continue, and that there is this continuity of ministry is very good. It's also a blessing to be here on the campus. We have our own campus ministry in the UK called Focus, the Fellowship of Orthodox Christian University Students. And it comes under the umbrella of our overall youth ministry body called well, it functions as Focus, and it comes under Coptic Youth Mission, which is our overall umbrella. My view has always been that as a church, we don't wait for people to come to us, but within the understanding of the ministry of Christ, you go to people. So being here on campus is important. When we started the campus ministry, people said, well, you know, we have churches in London, why don't we just gather the university students and have the meetings in the churches? And I was adamant that wouldn't be the case, because that's not what we're doing. You see, if we follow that model, it means that you have to go to church to experience Christ. You have to go to church to receive Christian teaching, so on and so forth. Whereas in my understanding, it is through being here on campus, you sanctify this campus, you bless this campus. You become a presence of Christ on this campus. And that's very important. It means, firstly, the church is coming to you where you live. It sanctifies where you are, rather than waiting for you to come to it. And secondly, through your mere presence, you are presenting a viable alternative. You see, people always will tell you that when you're at university, this is the crazy time. This is where you go nuts. This is where you do anything that you really shouldn't do, but you know, before you become older and boring, then you just get it out of your system. And that's why people do insane things. Going completely above and beyond any realm of what they would have expected themselves. But what we've realized is that's not how it should be. You are the same person you always should be. Whether it's in church, in your home, on campus, with your friends, in a social setting, anywhere. You shouldn't be dealing with this concept of multiple personality disorder. It is, you know, if you suffer multiple personality disorder in a psychological sense, is seen as an ailment. It's a disorder. But we tend to almost live this disorder justifiably every day of our lives. We think that it's okay to be different people. We think that it's okay to be someone on campus here today and do whatever you do on campus and go out at night and socialize, have socialized, but then to be somebody else at home with your family or your church. Now the fact, and this is actually pretty much preaching to the choir, because the fact that you're here means you have that commitment. The fact that you're here means that this place is also a place in which you live your faith. And that's how it should be. But you're going to experience challenges. Our problem spiritually, and I touched on this a little bit last night, for those of you who were with us, speaking about the end of this Coptic year and the beginning of a new one, and the fact that we all make promises. We make New Year's resolutions. We promise God, others, and ourselves to do things that we actually never do, because we make the promise, but then it ends very soon after that. There's no sense of commitment. And it's not because we don't want to commit, but because life is so fast that we're almost not giving an opportunity to commit. We want to do something, but by the time we've had this talk and you walk out of that room, I guarantee you, 90% of you, if not 99%, including myself, the first thing you will do is get your phone out of your pocket and look at it to see what you've missed. Because of course the country's not running the same without you. But if they have an important strategy decision, we're going to be in serious trouble because you guys are in this room not taking calls. So you've got to make sure that the world is still a stable place as you walk out the door. You'll pick up your phone and you will get inundated with emails and messages and tweets, and you'll look through them. And because you've looked through them as you're walking out the door, everything you've decided here, everything you've promised here, evaporates. And you just move on to the next thing. You'll go to your class. Hopefully what you learn in your class will not evaporate, because that can have serious ramifications. Because God is much more patient and loving than your professors and the people who mark your papers. But it's also because we prioritize things differently. We know that in the academic sense, you must retain. You need to retain information. You need to retain what you learn. Even if not to actually use it when you work, but just be able to pass the exam. But we know that God is gracious and merciful, and that actually we keep forgetting, and He keeps forgiving us, and we keep going around in circles, and we're okay. We've gone around in circles for the last 2 or 3 years, so what's another 4 or 5? Until we get out of this loop. What we need to understand at this stage of your lives is that the coil actually gets smaller and smaller as you get older and more committed, because you become busier with lots of different things. You have more responsibilities, you have more commitments. You're not going to get freer than you are now. I know it doesn't seem like that at the moment. I know it seems like you're working every waking minute, even if that waking minute is waking up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Because university students, for some reason, become nocturnal. You know, you and the bats become one. Especially the computing students. Any computer guys here? Yeah. One of the greatest experiences I had. We have a children's conference once a year, because we only have it once a year, for 10 to 13-year-olds. And the people who serve this stage are people around your age, so university students. And the one time I enjoy the most in the year, please, if you want to call this vindictive, please forgive me, but it is when 120 or 150 10 to 13-year-olds wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning because they're really buzzing with excitement, and they jump on the beds of their servants who are university students who don't even know what 6 o'clock in the morning means. Because as far as you guys are concerned, sort of the clock goes till 2 a.m. and then you get twilight zone, and then it kicks in again at midday. And anything happens between 2 a.m. and midday is something that will be told in the fullness of time, because it just doesn't exist. So commitment is important. Commitment is really important. Commitment not only to what I want to do now, but what I want to do now, what I'm going to start doing today, what I will continue to do tomorrow and going forward. Because otherwise, all we will have are a series of failed promises. And we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to receive anything out of them. We're not going to benefit anything. We will put in an incredible amount of effort, and it will become frustrating. Because the effort is real. You take out of your time. You do things. And it is very difficult. But because there's no consistency, it's a failed energy. It's a wasted energy. It's invested into something that just doesn't continue on. We're not building anything. We almost like build a little straw structure and it gets blown away. Another one gets blown away. Whereas in actual fact, if we want to build ourselves properly as young men and women of God, then we build ourselves like this building. One row of bricks after the next. That first row isn't blown away, it stays there. Built on a very firm foundation, then you get one row over the next, over the next, over the next, until your structure is on. Psalm 37:5 says, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust also in him, he shall bring it to pass." Commit your way to the Lord. Commitment is not something we like these days. And I'm going to say something controversial. Please tell me if I'm absolutely wrong. But when it comes to relationships, people just aren't as ready to commit anymore. We're at a stage of our lives now where young men don't want to commit to long-term relationships. Or at least not until they're ready, whatever that means. And it means different things to different people. But why don't they want to commit? I'm going to go off a little bit of a tangent. Because whatever they want out of a stable relationship, they get in a short-term relationship. They get the emotional closeness, they get the companionship, they get the opening up, the moral support, the emotional support. They might even get the physical satisfaction. So why get into a long-term relationship? And it becomes a problem. And the more lines we cross, and especially within this setting you have here, people are crossing lines all the time. Because the more lines you cross, the more revolutionary you are. The more you're going to turn this world upside down, the more you are non-conformist. And so therefore you have your own character and identity. There are some lines that are there, not just because they're a challenge to be crossed, but because they really actually hide behind them a hornet's nest of danger. Or they hide behind them the bitterness of faith. But if we commit ourselves to God, we need to commit ourselves fully. And please don't misunderstand me. Committing yourself doesn't mean you become boring. We sometimes think by committing to God, it means your life stops. That's it. It's over. You become this boring, conformist, traditional, conservative person who just doesn't get anything, doesn't do anything, doesn't have any enjoyment, doesn't have any fun, nothing at all. And of course that's not right. I mean, I see a water here, I see the Sunni, I see the people who are servants. To commit your way to the Lord, even to this extent, doesn't mean that you can't engage with life. God is never an either or. He doesn't want to be an either or. Because if God becomes an either or, it doesn't make sense. God is not going to create a world for us and then say, you know what, I've created this world for you, but I don't want you to enjoy it. How would that even make sense? What he did say to Adam and Eve was, out of all of these thousands, possibly millions of trees and creatures, of these phenomena, all of this that I have created for you, out of all of that, I want you to experience it all fully. I want you to enjoy it. I even want you to have dominion over it. But of this one tree, do not eat. This one. But we see that making that commitment to not partaking of that one is the way of limiting us. Adam and Eve did. And they fell. We do it every day. We don't want to commit fully because we think committing fully means that we have no life of our own. God has given us this life to live and to enjoy. The one thing I want you to walk out of here with today is that God wants you to enjoy your life. But God wants you to enjoy your whole life. Because your life starts here and then continues in his kingdom. So God doesn't want an enjoyment that is here that is inconsistent with his kingdom eternally. Because that just wouldn't make sense. That would mean, I'm going to be with you for an hour, I would like you to enjoy 5 minutes of that, then it's over. As long as you cram everything in those 5 minutes, then the rest doesn't matter. That's not right. This life compared to eternity is not even 5 minutes in an hour. It is nothing. But we keep reading, we read, commit your way to the Lord. What does committing our way to the Lord mean then? Trust in him. Again, commitments mean trust. Now, rightly or wrongly, God trusts us. And if it wasn't God doing it, we would call that very foolish. But because God's doing it, it just means he's giving us more chances. He trusts us when we say to him, I'm sorry, I've repented, I want to do this differently, I want to try again. Because he can see into our hearts. He's made us, he's created us. He knows who we are. But do we trust him? We trust him when it suits us. We trust him when we get what we want. We trust him totally conditionally. How does it sound? If you had a very close friend, or you were in a romantic relationship at the right stage of your life, don't say the bishop said it was okay. If you're in that, and someone comes in and says, you know what, I like you, and I will trust you as long as you do just what I say. Just as long as you satisfy exactly what I want. Just as long as you do everything the way I have prescribed. And that's what we do, we prescribe for God. Say, God, thank you so much, I'm praying to you now, and I know you have the whole world in your hands, and I know that you have created everything, I know you have dominion, you have power, you have authority, you have majesty, I know all of that. But you just don't get my life. You get the whole of the creation, but you don't get my life. I'm the authority of my life. So what I'm going to do, I'll let you know what you should be doing. Okay? I'm only asking for it, but I'm trying to give you a hand here because, you know, just trying to speed up the process. So, God, what I want is this. And not only do I want this, I want it in this way. And if you don't give it to me in this way, then I'm going to feel like you don't love me. And I can't commit to you anymore. I can't trust you until you give me exactly what I want when I want it. I can't trust you enough to say, okay, maybe I don't have the full picture, and God is perfect, and perfectly wise, and perfectly knowledgeable, and so therefore I'll leave it in his hands. We don't do that. Or at least many of us. We prescribe. God, I want this how, at this time. What if God doesn't give us that example? What do we do? No, Lord, you've let me down. I've trusted you, I prayed to you, I stood before you, I opened up to you. But does that actually mean that we need to get exactly what we want the way we want it? Now, surely, if I'm placing my hands into my life into someone's hands, then I need to trust that person. So, for instance, I flew here yesterday from London. So I got onto a plane where the pilot was flying the plane. Now, of course, I was standing around, the pilot came out, and one guy had to make the same joke, haha, who's flying the plane? It's got to be around every flight. But you've got to believe he or you know, his assistants, someone's flying the plane. So I have bought my ticket and said to him, listen, Mr. Pilot, I have contracted with your company that you are taking me from London to New York. I'm going to get on your plane, and I want you to follow this course. Now, hang on, wait. Should you want to get to New York, right? That's what you want? You leave the flight to me. You don't understand flight. You might think you do. Yeah, but I'm on planes all the time. What's the flying? Thing goes up, floats, comes down. What's the problem with that? You guys are on autopilot all the time anyway. No, wait. Where do you want to go? I want to go to New York. Then trust me. When I get there, I'll get you. Just sit, enjoy the journey. Don't worry about what I'm doing. Just enjoy the journey. If there are a few bumps, I'll tell you to put your seatbelt on. Because you're still safe. Because the world will be bumpy sometimes. If I need to brake hard left or hard right, I'll tell you to put your seatbelt on. Might be a little uncomfortable, but you're okay. The most important thing is, you want to get to New York, and I'm going to get you. That's what we need to be with God. We need to commit ourselves to Him, and then trust Him. Lord, I want to get to your kingdom. The question is, why? Why do we want to get to God's kingdom? And if the answer is, because I don't want to go to hell, if the answer is, because I'm afraid of Satan, if the answer is, because my Sunday school teacher told me to, any of those answers don't work. Why do I want to get to the kingdom? Because God's there. That's why. Because I love Him and I want to spend eternity with Him. Because I live with Him here and I feel it's not enough, so I want to live with Him eternally. So surely, if I just want to be with Him, then what does it matter how I get there? If I trust myself to Him, if I'm there, if I'm strapped into my seat, if I have people coming and nourishing me along the way and serving me, people looking after my comfort, when I get alarmed, people come and reassure me. When there's danger, warning lights go on. But at the end of the day, I'm going to fly, I'm going to land where I wanted to. So what is the problem? The problem is, we climb into the cockpit. No, God, just sit over here. I'll show you how this is done. You don't quite get it. I know you're God, and I don't mean to be sacrilegious. I know you're God, and I know you're perfect. But you know, there could have been better solutions to this one. Really? Like, because you have knowledge of all things at all times, in one instant? Because you know the future? Because you understand everything? Because you understand what eternity is? Because you can see the unseen, the invisible dangers? Because you're not swayed by human failings? Because you're not prejudiced by human desires? That's why you think you can tell me how to fly this plane? But we do. And God graciously sits back. It's your plane. At the end of the day, it's your life. It's your journey. And if we commit to Him, then we are assured. I was speaking to someone earlier today about investments, and seeing that many of us are risk averse. I don't like making risky investments. Some people do. Some people thrive on it. The adrenaline is what keeps some people going. They're commonly referred to as gamblers. But if you don't want to take risks, you look for a solid investment. And there is no investment on this earth, as we have seen over the past few years, that is not without risk. Some people have lost everything because they trusted in the wrong thing. They trusted in themselves. They trusted in what they thought was right. What if I were to tell you there was one investment that was 100% foolproof? One investment that could not go wrong. One investment that you are assured of the outcome. That you have to trust. If you go to an investment advisor, this person will say to you, invest in this, but you need to trust me. When we go to God and say, Lord, I want to be with you. I love you. I've experienced you. I've heard all these wonderful stories in this next area. I've read your words in Scripture. I want to live like all those who have lived this life. All those people who are so dedicated and committed, all those people who have experienced you and love you so much. I want to be like that. How do I do that? You say very easily. Commit yourself to me and trust me. What does the end of that verse say? And he will bring it to pass. Whatever you want, put before God. And put it before him with all confidence. But put it open to the fact that you may not get it. You know, if this pilot finds that there is danger and finds that he needs to take a totally different route, or finds that because of the danger, rather than landing into New York, he has to find an alternative place to land the plane. For my safety, for my well-being. Am I going to say, no, I said this is what I want. I said take this route. I said land in this airport. To the best of my knowledge, I have said to God, Lord, I want this job, this career, this relationship. I want this, whatever it is. And put everything before God. Don't be ashamed to put anything before God, no matter how small you think it is. God doesn't think small and large. Our Lord says that we should seek, ask, and knock. He does not place a size restriction on this stuff. He doesn't say seek, but only if it's really important. Knock, only if it's really, really precious. He doesn't say that. Everything. With thanksgiving, we place everything before the Lord. But in that, we also need to trust him and say, Lord, I've experienced you. Just as I have read these stories of these saints, and just as I have read your word in your scriptures, just as I have seen all of these people who have done so well and lived so well, just as I've seen all of that, I now know that the reason they achieved what they achieved, the reason they became who they were, is not because there was some big lightning bolt, there wasn't a magic spell, there wasn't an incantation, there was a life. They lived a certain life. And because they lived that life, they achieved, by God's grace, by your grace, Lord, exactly what you wanted to give them and what their heart desired. So we need to place that before him and say, Lord, I want you in my life. And I want to do whatever I can. I want to be with you because I know what it is to be away from you. But we do need to trust him. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him. He will bring all this to pass. Short term, long term, what you may see as important or unimportant, big or small, whatever decision it is, place it before God. Commit your way to him, to walking with him righteously, not to walk with him conditionally. Lord, I'm going to be righteous with you today, but not tomorrow. Because tomorrow I'm going to party today. Tomorrow I've got something to do. Tomorrow I've got a social commitment. And it's not about being in a social community. It's not about being in a party. You're not 12. It's about what you let go of when you're living a life that is not in the way that committed to God. Commit your way to God. Trust Him. And as He has promised, He will bring it all to pass. And glory to God. You just take a few moments to put your heads down and focus on what you just heard. Any questions or comments? I'm happy to take questions from the floor, if you have any. Yes?
How do you make that supplication for God for certain things maybe you want, desire, leave without telling you, or making it seem like you're telling God how you do it in a humble way?
How do you ask for things without making it seem like you're telling God what to do? I think you can even tell God what to do, but just as long as you don't impose it on Him. So you can say, Lord, I would like this thing, and I would like it at this time in this way. There's no problem with that. But as long as you know that being in His hands, even if you don't get it in that specific way, then He's still got your best interest at heart. He's still doing the best thing. Now, it's not wrong to be very specific in what we want. But realize that if we don't get it, there must be a reason why. And I know that sounds pretty cliche, but it's not. So, Mary's known me for a long time, right? So, if you ask me for something, do you have any doubt in the world that I would give you whatever I could? If I didn't give you something, would you doubt my intention? What's it based on? Love, knowledge, experience, that's what it's based on. So if you have someone you're very close to and you say, I want this, and they say, no, I don't think so. Based on your understanding and knowledge and experience of that person, you think, okay, there must be a reason. And that's how we should do it. Anyone else? Yes? So the question is, for those of you who can't hear, how long do you persist in prayer? How long is a piece of string? There is no right and wrong answer. The answer is this, that someone like Hannah didn't just want a son. Someone like Hannah had a relationship with God. And so she prayed, not because she wanted something, there was no time limit. She was praying until she either got what she wanted or she didn't get what she wanted. It didn't matter. If we deal with God merely as a service provider, then if we don't get what we want, we become very upset. Or if He is merely a service provider, then I'm only dealing with Him for as long as I get the service. Right? But if this is a relationship, then it's open-ended. I'm praying to Him anyway. I'm praying to Him about lots of things. You know what? If I keep praying about it every day, it doesn't matter. If it's still on my heart to pray about it, keep praying about it. but I don't hold on to it in a way that says, I'm only praying to you because I want this, and I want to know when to stop praying. Okay? Again, if what's your name? Barbara. So, if I were to even think what you would want to have for lunch today, I have no idea, right? If I would think so if I want to go out and get you lunch, how would I even think about that? The only way I'm going to get to know that is by knowing you enough and spending enough time with you, and you opening up to me, and you sort of sharing lunch with me, and you doing this and doing that, so it becomes knowledge. So sometimes we don't know what we want from God. We don't have that relationship with Him because we don't know Him. We know what we want. We don't know Him. So we don't know how He's going to give it to us. So if I invest my time in getting to know God, rather than just in getting what I want, then it becomes a long-term relationship in which I start to understand Him. And so therefore I know when to ask and when not to ask, what to ask for, what not to ask for, and even when I ask for something, if I don't get it, it doesn't upset me, because I know Him well enough. So it's investing in the relationship rather than in God as a service provider. Does that make sense? Anyone else? I've got some questions here. Okay. I'll just do as many as we can. What time do we? 1:45. So one person says, I believe that it is more important to trust myself ourselves are very fickle, and ourselves change. Ourselves don't always make a lot of sense, because ourselves are governed by emotion, by pressures, by our own particular experiences, by things we experience through life, all of that. And that's what we ourselves have. So for me to know myself, of course, is important, but only if I'm going to know myself as God's image and likeness. Not the myself that keeps changing. Not the myself that is today very different to what it was yesterday, and very different to what it may be tomorrow. Because if that's just the myself that I want to understand and know, then I'm going to find it very difficult to have a long-term, prolonged trust. And of course we need to know ourselves. We need to know ourselves as God's creation. I don't think anything that we said today means that we don't need to know ourselves. But in knowing God more, we know ourselves more, because we see ourselves through His eyes. How do I build genuine love for God to want to follow Him, regardless of temptation and tribulation? Again, still my experience. I've experienced God enough to have felt His commitment and His love, His trustworthiness, then that's going to build up. But if I don't give myself enough time, then it becomes more difficult. And don't forget that at the moment, there is a huge lobby that tells you that God is this harsh, heartless, rigid being who just condemns people and allows wars and children to die and people to become sick. And if that's the picture that I start to develop of God because of what's being said around me, then that's what I'm dealing with. And if that's what I deal with, that becomes the reality of who God is in my eyes. But God's not like that. God's not like that at all. We also see the gentleness of God. So people say the God of the Old Testament was so harsh. Yeah, but the God of the Old Testament is the same God who opened the Red Sea, who gave his children water from a rock, manna from heaven. He's the one who led them with a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. Those aren't signs of a heartless God. But we focus on one side of God alone. So the way to develop and build that trust is by getting to know him for who he really is, not just who the world sometimes tells us he is. And also, not to deal with him out of fear. Don't be afraid of God. Don't be afraid of him. He's your Father who loves you. Be afraid of losing him. Be afraid of upsetting him. Because if you're upsetting him, you're doing the wrong thing. But don't be afraid of him. Because he's the one who, like in the story of the prodigal son, stands and waits for us. Regardless of how long we've been away, where we've gone, or what we are when we return. Of course we commit, and of course we trust. But how do we avoid over-analyzing the situation? Exercising our own rational judgment versus letting go to God's will. Again, we like these either-or scenarios, don't we? It's either me being rational or giving into God's will. But what if giving into God's will is a rational choice? Why does it have to be irrational? Why does the only rational thing have to be that I hold on to what I want and what makes sense to me logically? If I start to have the mind of Christ, that's why St. Paul speaks to us about having the mind of Christ, and putting on Christ, about being the new man. It's because in that newness, we get new eyes, a new mind, and a new perception. There doesn't always have to be a conflict. It's like when you're growing up, you either listen to your parents or have a good time. You learn after a while, that's not really the truth. That's the way it's spun to you. That's not really the truth. The truth is, if you're a mature, trustworthy person, then you can have a great time and obey your parents. If you have a good relationship with God, then you can be totally rational in those decisions based on an understanding of him. If someone has cancer and will die, how do we accept it? We just had a debate in the UK today in Parliament on what they called the Assisted Dying Act. Thankfully it failed. If anyone wants to read anything about it, I issued a statement about it yesterday. And it was that if people are dying, then we should be able to let them select that they die and be assisted. It's not like euthanasia where you go to a place that kills you. Assisted dying or assisted suicide is where you are legally able to bring somebody in, a healthcare professional or someone else, who can give you lethal drugs to take yourself and die. which is a really horrible way to look. It's a horrible way to be. When you think that death is better than life, not because you aspire to the kingdom, but because you're a burden, or because you don't want to be around, or because you have no hope anymore. It's a horrible place. But again, if you look at illness, it's not always a horrible place. How many people have you seen who have used their illness for the glory of God, to reassure people? I've seen people who, in their illness, become such inspirations. They're not resentful, they're not angry. Yes, they feel pain, but God gives them people around them to support them and gives them courage. Does that mean that life is only important if it's whole, if it's perfect? We have such an incredible focus now on body image and what we think is physical perfection. So that anything short of that is just undesirable. And it's good. It's good if you want to do it to be healthy. It is perfect because your body is the temple of God and the Holy Spirit abides in it. We owe it to ourselves to be healthy, as God's handiwork and as God's temple. But not if it becomes an obsession at the expense of what's on the inside. So if I'm looking at people who are physically ill, spiritually they may be far stronger than any of us, or all of us put together. But our assessment is now far too often purely on the physical. Because that's how we think, and that's what we see. And at the end of the day, I know it sounds morbid, but as university students, you're in this philosophical stage of your lives where you like to sound really intelligent and engaged and philosophical. So death is something we're all going to go through. Death is, we all know the saying that the only certain thing in the world, in life, is death. We're all going to die. We're not meant to live forever in this body. We're not created for that. And if we did, it would be a miserable existence. Imagine having to live forever. Imagine living for hundreds of years. And then if you lived for hundreds of years, as in the Old Testament, and someone died at 500, he said, oh, they were snapped up. They just got into their prime. They didn't even experience their whole life, because they could have lived till 700. Life is finite. And that's what we need to come to terms with. It is not about when it ends, but it's about how we've lived it as it continues. How do we approach people who we care about, who have multiple personalities without offending them? It very much depends on your relationship with them. If there's someone who's close enough for you to speak to, then speak to them. If there's someone who's not close enough, then find other avenues. Because sometimes it is offensive to be approached in a certain way that you may not be entitled to. And if it's that close a relationship, then people should really understand. And again, choosing our words. Choosing what we say and how we say it. Choosing how and when we deliver it, and how gracious we are is very important. Our Lord, when he went to the Samaritan woman, he knew he wanted to change her. And he didn't suddenly turn around and say, woman, you're living a sinful life, you need to repent. He started speaking about water, and then he asked about her husband, and then they spoke about where to pray, and it just went on and on and on and on. And suddenly she went and she evangelized and she came back and she believed it. So the approach is very important. Why are so many people leaving the church? I think it's a broad statement. I think some young people do leave the church, just as some older people leave the church. It's a sad thing. I'm not saying it's okay that it's only a few. It's actually tragic that it's only one. But I think a matter of scale is important. Sometimes we make up an understanding and then believe it. And because we believe it, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you guys sit here, you ask the bishop, why all youth are leaving? I'll say to you lots of stuff. You go out here actually believing that all the youth are leaving the church. And you think you're an anomaly. You think, well, we're the only ones around, everyone has left. No, you need to look over your shoulder and realize there are thousands of you. All the youth haven't left the church. There may be things they don't like about the church, and that is the problem of being church. The church is this incredibly complex vehicle that has to be all things to all people. Because we all take church so seriously. You know, in some other Christian contexts, when people have a much more arm's length dealing with their parishes, then they'll go, they'll attend, they'll leave. Culturally, for us, the church is an extension of our homes, an extension of our families. You have requirements, you have expectations. And so therefore, you feel like you have an absolute right for it to be exactly what you want it to be. The only problem is, in your parish alone, there are 500 other people who are thinking exactly the same thing. And globally, there are 15 million of us thinking the same thing. So you try to put together a vehicle that fits the purpose and need of 15 million individuals. Of course it's going to be difficult. But that's where we need to work together. The church, and I'm not going to see us and you, because the church is all of us. I don't want you to ever make this distinction between the clergy and you know, the laity, or the young and the old, or that's wrong. That's not the church. When we speak about the church, I'm not the church. Abuna's not the church. We are the church together. We are all the church. So the church, all of us, needs to provide for those who feel that they don't belong, who feel that maybe they need more or need different. But in a way in which those people also need to be gracious enough to understand that there are others in the equation. So very simply, just one very simple scenario of language, for instance. You know, do we pray in English or Coptic? Although it's becoming less of an issue now, because all of our churches use appropriate languages now. Of course, here in the US, we've got a different dynamic of the recent surge of people from Egypt who have come, who have tipped sometimes the balance of their parishes to almost being 50-50 newcomer to people who have been there for years. And it's not a bad thing, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, it's not a bad thing. You know, don't feel, oh, I need to be coming and doing this to my church. They are the church, just as you are the church. They have every right to be served, just as you do. They have no right to say, we've just come from Egypt, this needs to be all Arabic. They have no right to say that, in the same way that you don't have a right to say, oh, these people don't really matter. So what we need to do is to deal with each other in a way that says, how do we make the church better for each other? Not how do you make the church better for me, but how do we make the church better for each other? And I think you'll find that will be a much more positive conversation. At the end of the day, and I've said this to our own young people in the UK, when there was one of our parishes, you know, this thing about has to have everything in English, and they had one liturgy at the time. I said, well, no, you can't. Yeah, but we've gone through for so many years, but people just didn't listen to us. How did it feel? It was terrible. So would you wish that feeling upon a person standing next to you who didn't understand English? Just because it's not happening to me doesn't mean it's okay. If I felt that injustice, if I felt that alienation, that marginalization, how could I wish it on someone else that's all right? We can't. The liturgy in particular, the church, needs to be a place for all. We all need to have ownership. We all need to appreciate it. I need to sacrifice for you, you need to sacrifice for me, and in doing that, we need to love it more and love each other more. The church is the last place where I need to be selfish. I can't stomp in, slam my fist on the table, and say, if you don't do this, I'm leaving. Of course, I don't want you to leave. But there are 20 other people stomping in and pounding their fists on the table as well. And they're all saying totally conflicting things. So rather than stomping in and punching tables, let's talk about how the church becomes a church for all. And I'm really happy that that conversation is happening more and more. I know there's been a survey going around recently about why the youth leaving the church. I think we need to be careful with that terminology, because I think we're giving people the impression that all the youth have left. You're here, and this is a Friday afternoon in New York during school term, during your educational classes, at a week's notice. This isn't everyone leaving the church. As I said, just because it's small doesn't mean that it's okay. But don't believe that you are an absolute anomaly, because that will make you feel marginalized as well, and will actually unfairly present what the church is and where we are today. Thank you for your time. It's been good spending it with you. I wish you every blessing. I hope you have really interesting classes for the rest of the afternoon that are going to energize you and wake you up and put you to sleep. And hopefully we'll see some of you tonight at St. Mary's in East London. Yeah, those of you who can make it. I think I'm going to Rutgers, New Brunswick, this afternoon, and then to the youth meeting tonight. So if you're one of those university hopping, please go to the bars. Hopefully I'll see you again.
I would like to thank God for this breath of fresh air. Truly, I think we got a very clear and succinct message. The thing that hit me the most is the word commitment, and this is something we ought to keep in our minds as we start this semester. We start strong in the beginning, and then our meetings kind of attendance drops. So I think we need to stay the course and be committed that there's a purpose for this youth ministry, as His Grace outlined. So I think definitely it's a good message for all of us. I'd like to extend, I'd like to thank Sayyid again for taking the time. On behalf of Coptic Society, of Rutgers Newark, and NJIT, would like to present this piece with a small token of appreciation for the audience. Also, I'd like to extend a welcome to our alumni who came, who used to come here a long time ago in their undergrads, and they moved, they took on different challenges. Undergrads and visitors, Sonia and everybody who come from other campuses would like to extend a welcome and see us. Please drop by any time and find very welcoming atmosphere here. I'd like to also welcome all the CS members. I'm sure you're familiar with all the events, so we'll make announcements now, but please be part of this. I mean, this is yours. As Stephen said, the church doesn't belong to the bishop or the priest or the deacons. It is for everybody. The same thing, by the same Spirit, can extrapolate that this fellowship belongs to everybody here. So I encourage you to attend, I encourage you to register, to register your cell phone numbers, to get messages and so forth. Is there any making announcements for the upcoming events? Wednesday, Lord willing, we'll have His Grace Bishop Karas here with us, so there's more exciting events coming.
Just 3 really quick announcements.